Also, the focus should not be only on a women, other group, also the other groups such as persons with disabilities, the youth, IDBs, and other marginalized groups should receive their fair share. The ministry is also working with the representative from the vulnerable groups to see how we can support their democratic effort and campaign to get selected as a member of Somali Parliament. Your Excellency Prime Minister, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we often see an increase of human rights violations during election. It is important that we do all we can avoid to human rights violation in general, and mainly during the coming elections. Among the rights that are violated are the rights to freedom of assembly, the rights to freedom of opinion and expression, the rights to political participation, the rights to transparent electoral process where all the stakeholders can monitor the process to ensure free and fair election. My ministry will work with all the stakeholders to ensure that we address likely violations together with the relevant government institutions. Finally, we also urge the Attorney General to closely monitor human rights violations during the election and promise that criminals do not enjoy the impunity. Thank you very much, Excellencies.
Thank you, Ms. Hanifa Mohammed Ibrahim, Minister of Women and Human Rights Development. Now I would like to welcome to the floor Ms. Halima Ismail Ibrahim, Chair of National Independent Electoral Commission. Welcome.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Your Excellency Prime Minister, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to address this forum regarding Somalia's democratization journey and the National Independent Electoral Commission preparation for the federal parliamentarian election. From the outset, I wish to extend my sincere appreciation to the federal government of Somalia, the federal member states, regional Banaadir, and the international community for their unserved support for NIC. As you will be aware, the NIC is the constitutional mandate body to oversee the planning and management of electoral process throughout the Federal Republic of Somalia. Similarly, you will also be aware that the task of planning and managing an election is not always easy. It can be even more challenging in a post-conflict society where universal elections have not been held for more than half a century. It's also worth mentioning that for the past 20 years, Somalia and its international partners have been on a mission to prepare the country for one person, one vote election. In this regard, Somalia's leaders have over the years made several commitments to the Somali people and the international community to hold one person, one vote election by 2020. The majority of Somali citizens received the Baidoa Agreement made by National Security Council in June 2018 as offering the best hope to hold federal parliamentary election based on the proportional representation single constituency model. The Somali people saw the Baidoa Agreement as the most significant political achievement of the past 10 years, as they believed the agreement was a genuine commitment towards holding an inclusive election. The Baidoa Agreement also became the basis for all the subsequent discussion and planning on Somalia's path to democratization. This includes the Somali Partnership Forum, the Mutual Accountability Framework, and the Somali National Development Plan. Following the Baidoa Agreement, the NIC made a significant preparation for the holding of one-person election by the end of this year. Your Excellency, I want to note that as Somali's mandate electoral managed body since the Berewa Agreement and earlier, we, the NIC, have been preparing ourselves to ensure that very critical activity for 2020 election is implemented according to the electoral operation calendar. With the assistance of the UN Integrated Election Support Group, ISG, and the NIC, has managed to accomplish crucial activities in preparation for 2020 election. These include building the capacity of NIC, establishment of NIC field office in all FMSF, identification and verification of potential voter registration sites and selection of voter registration model, developing the voter education curriculum and supporting material, building the NIC data center, the warehouse and the electoral dispute resolution center, registration of political parties. Your Excellencies, the NIC preparation for 2021 election were on track until political disagreement emerged between the federal government and federal member states, whose combined political support and genuine commitment to hold one person, one vote election were critical for the NIC to conduct the election. Regrettably, although Somali leaders had agreed on the proportional representation single constituent at Baidawa meeting, and the NIC was on course to conduct 2021 election, the process became politicized. By September, the Somali leaders agreed on the indirect election models for the federal election. This was a complete departure from the Baidawa agreement and several years of preparation made to hold one person, one vote election. Your Excellencies, let us not forget that the people of Somalia want to exercise their rights to participate in direct election because they believe that a free, fair, and inclusive election will help to bring stability and lasting peace to our country. Your Excellencies, 2020 will always be remembered as the missed opportunity for Somalia's democratization journey. The Somali leaders have very opportunity to give the Somali people a chance to directly elect their leaders. I recognize that the 2020 opportunity is now behind us, but I always believe we can all learn from our mistakes. I appreciate the Somali leaders have in their last agreement demonstrated their commitment to one person, one vote election to be held in 2024-25. While I congratulate the leaders for expressing their commitment to direct election, I am also apprehensive that history could repeat itself in 2024-2025, because since 2000, these compromises and commitment were arising and it ended in the week. Therefore, to ensure 2024-25 electoral is done in a timely and inclusive fashion, I would like to make the following recommendation. Ensure there is a roadmap to hold a direct direction in 2024. It's also essential that the roadmap and its implementation approach have universal acceptance by all stakeholders, including civil society and political parties, and express commitment for the implementation of the roadmap by the federal government and federal member states, the parliament, and international partners, such as a commitment should include agreed benchmarks and partial consequence for the failure to meet those benchmarks. Ensure an oversight mechanism comprised of the key stakeholders who are charged with the responsibility for the implementation of the roadmap and periodic reporting on the progress in meeting these benchmarks. Ensure the Parliament passes a resolution in support of the agreed commitment on the roadmap. The federal government is to commit an annual contribution of an amount of budget at the GDP percentage towards electoral operation to minimize the reliance on the international community for 2024-25 election budget. In conclusion, I would like to stress to the next government and to the Somalis international partners that the 24-25 election should be the most critical priority for all stakeholders and not miss this opportunity again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Halim Ismail Ibrahim. Now, I would like to ask the interventions and remarks by the international partners. I don't know if it's ready by Egypt. Yeah. Sharif Mahmoud Saeed. Okay, you can start.
Mr. Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Presidents of federal member states, ministers, colleagues, I don't think it is the time to recall the European Union and its member states' engagement with Somalia for the last decades. We know that this forum, the forum that we are celebrating today, combines short-term analysis and longer-term engagements. Please allow me to be brief to concentrate on the short-term needs to move forward Somalia towards a path of stability and prosperity. In this sense, in this short-term analysis, let's recognize one thing. For the last 4 years, for the last 3 years, for the last 2 years, for the last year, we have seen significant progress in the Somali society. Even for those of us that live in Mogadishu, we have seen the significant improvement in the security in Mogadishu, and we have all congratulated the fact of seeing how the buildings, how activities, how young people are booming now in the streets of Mogadishu. But let's be frank and recognize that there is only one thing that has not moved forward. There is only one thing that has extended the gap between what the Somali citizens want and what the reality is, and this is the electoral agreement. The electoral agreement did not move enough and still is back in 2016, as if the time had not passed. And this is a real disappointment for the European Union and for its member states. But we are partners, and you know, we promote dialogue and we see solutions in the difficulties. And in this sense, we would like to propose 5 lines of action that could rebuild this confidence and could be accepted as conclusion or output of the Somali Partnership Forum of today. The first one is we subscribe what has been said by the Prime Minister and President Deni and others. We would like to see a National Security Council be called as soon as possible, as soon as this week, as soon as early next week. Leaders should meet and leaders should agree and use the Somali way of solving problems with tea and words and try to overcome the small difficulties. The second thing is also directed not only to the leaders, not only to the federal government or federal member state leaders, but also to the opposition leaders. I'm sure that with the strong social media in Somalia, they are also following us. And the suggestion is, please refrain for declarations that exacerbate emotions. They are a flavor of all times. We should all overcome that because this is not the positive way we all want for Somalia. Please measure the words in terms of declarations, and if you allow me to go a little bit further, I think this exacerbation of emotion should be applied also to Somalia's neighbors and to declaration from Somalia to its neighbors. Third thing, women. Nobody, no society, even those that we are supposed to be more developed, no society can hold the sky with one hand. This is what Nelson Mandela said. I mean, we cannot exclude half of the population from the political, economic, or social life. So whatever decision is taken to rebuild our confidence, women should be very active and present. Please keep that in mind. Fourth thing, it is not enough to engage in a roadmap towards a direct election in 24 and 25. This is no longer credible, I'm sorry to say so, because we have seen that in the past. This engagement should include to move towards a more direct election from now on in local and state elections that will be organized in the next year or in the next years before 24 and 25. This will be a base to create solid pillars for the 24-25 elections. If we all wait till 24-25, we all know the difficulties will grow up. We will not know where we will be at that time. The final fifth is about freedom, freedom of media, freedom of criticism. We all suffer. I mean, we all suffer now, these days, the criticism, decision, and people that just with a smartphone, they think they are journalists or they think they have the right to say whatever they want. But please, these people should not be put in prison. This is the rule of law, and the law allows to find ways to frame this declaration, or at least to have expression of this declaration. But the solution of putting journalists or have this reaction from leaders to put people in prison, this is no longer acceptable. So, Mr. Prime Minister, I probably went beyond the diplomatic language because I think we are in a moment of truth. And this moment of truth is that we want to continue being your partner, but we are not satisfied with what we have seen for the last month, and we would like to express that, and hopefully in a very positive way to propose our lines to reestablish the confidence of our partnership and continue working together for a better future for Somalia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Nicholas Berlang. Now I would like to welcome the Egypt Ambassador.
Thank you, Excellency. Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Ministers, Excellency, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, let me first personally express I'm very pleased and very proud to be in Mogadishu, coming from Cairo directly, carrying a message of how Egypt is interested and concerned about the stability of Somalia. Somalia, the land that is linked with a long history with Egypt. And this history now needs to be in the future, this intensive cooperation between the two countries. Mr. Prime Minister, allow me please to give us a short statement with reflection on the intensive review of Their Excellency, the ministers concerning the elections. Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to convey the appreciation of the government of Egypt to the efforts of the federal government of Somalia and the federal states and all the Somali stakeholders to achieve political, economic developments during the last year at a very challenging time of the triple shocks facing Somali people, the COVID-19, locusts, and the floods. Excellencies, Egypt welcomes the progress made and the agreement reached between the federal government and the federal member states on the electoral model and other elements relevant to holding credible, inclusive, and transparent elections, both parliamentary and presidential. Respecting all the elements of the agreement and ensuring its implementation is a shared responsibility between the federal government and the federal member states and all the Somali stakeholders. In this regard, Egypt looks forward to the holding of the inclusive, transparent, and successful elections that ensures the continuation of the impressive model Somalia has set on the peaceful elections since 2008. We look forward to the completion of the ongoing efforts related to the inclusive policies, in particular the constitutional review process and reaching a common vision on the federalism, both of which are important pillars and cornerstones in building the Somali institutions and ensuring a clear relationship between the federal government and the federal states. Finally, we welcome the commitment put forward by the federal government in the MAF 2021 and the federal government pledge to ensure a peaceful transition of power and set the incoming administration in best position to achieve the much-needed progress in the outstanding elements that requires political consensus. Egypt is very ready to provide any needed support in this regard, including through the Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peace Building, and also through the African Center for Development and Reconstruction. I thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Next will be Ambassador Stefan Tillander from Sweden.
Prime Minister, ministers, colleagues and friends, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here today in person, in spite of COVID and everything. The Somali Partnership Forum and the Mutual Accountability Framework have served well as a common platform for moving forward. In London 2017, in Brussels 2018, where Sweden had the honor to co-host together with Somalia and the European Union, and last year in Mogadishu. It's particularly useful as a means to agree common benchmarks and actions. Even if not all goals are achieved, it nevertheless serves to take stock of progress from the year that has passed and identify areas for the coming year where more efforts are needed. It's good we who are here could meet in person in spite of COVID. We welcome the participation by others via the web, including the federal member states. We know efforts were made by the Prime Minister himself and others to achieve the full in-person participation by the federal member states, and we regret that this could not be the case. We are getting used to Zoom and the web, but it's not the same as meeting in person. It's important that the federal member states can participate in preparations, in the meeting itself, and the follow-up. And we look forward to that being the case in coming SPFs. Now a few comments on inclusive politics, on commitments agreed and included in the Mutual Accountability Framework. And I was asked to speak on behalf of the partners working closely with Somalia on this issue. And Sweden is one of the co-chairs together with Norway and the United States. We believe that the focus for 2021 should be to establish a basis for ongoing political dialogue and consensus building. We welcome the Prime Minister's indication of a meeting the federal government and the federal member states soon. We also welcome the government's intention expressed in the MAF to establish a formal and ongoing mechanism for dialogue, representing views of the highest levels in the federal member states and the federal government, alongside civil society, which meets no less than monthly to resolve core issues on the electoral process and broader issues related to the federal settlement. In the words of Minister Salah, to institutionalize this dialogue. Many of the achievements made in Somalia have been possible by reaching consensus, also in areas where positions have differed. Through an openness and willingness to find common ground, agreements have been possible. We believe such a mechanism will enable Somalia to overcome political impasse between the FGS and FMS, open the way to establish a plan for focusing on core issues of political contestation, on the sharing of power and resources across the federated Somalia, and track progress on these matters, thus enabling broader progress on Somalia's development goals. A few additional specific points for the coming year. The constitutional review should proceed. It should acknowledge the common understanding reached on a number of issues identified as non-contentious. It should recognize international human rights commitments, and the provisional constitution should be extended into the next parliament. Inclusive politics also means recognizing the role of women, youth, and civil society, freedom of the media, and measures to stop arrest of journalists. A mechanism, furthermore, is needed to ensure the achievement of at least 30% women in parliament. The broad consensus achieved on the present election process needs to be maintained through continuous dialogue to implement a fair and transparent process in all constituencies. This is necessary for the legitimacy of the process and its outcome, and to maintain the record of regular and peaceful elections. We welcome the recognition expressed by the President of Axmed and his preparedness to again play a role to facilitate dialogue on the election process. We welcome the commitment to democratic one-person, one-vote elections during the coming years. As the EU Ambassador Nicholas stated, this should include democratic elections at local and state levels, as well as early preparations and agreements on legislation and other measures that will ensure democratic federal elections 2024-25. The regular dialogue between the federal government and the states will facilitate agreements and joint progress on key issues such as elections and democracy, national reconciliation, federalism, including revenue sharing, justice and corrections, governments, and the national security architecture and its implementation. Allow me, Prime Minister, just a few brief comments in my national capacity as well. Through the HIPC process, Somalia has taken crucial steps towards state building and becoming a part of the international economic and political cooperation. The accession to the WTO will build on many of the HIPC reforms, while further strengthening the drive towards such reforms, helping Somalia to take advantage of international trade and cooperation. The reforms create trust and faith in the system and the country, trust that is necessary for investments and economic development. It requires long-term engagement and commitment from Somali leaders at all levels, as we have seen through the HIPC process, where the close cooperation between the FGS and FMS have been of such great importance. It will also require long-term commitment and support from international partners, and we should all be ready for that. Thank you so much, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Ambassador Stefan. Now I would like to call the ambassador from Denmark, Ulle Thonk. He's online, I think. Okay.
A warm welcome to everybody there, including federal member states, ministers, all partners. First of all, a big thanks from our side for organizing this event. We believe that the Somalia Partnership Forum is a key event, and it is a really good platform to have a dialogue, both between, of course, the international partners and Somalia, the federal government, but also between federal government and federal member states and all parties. And I think already the statements and what we have heard so far is a very, very good start to this forum. For me, it has been really rewarding to come back to the region and also engage with Somalia once more, since I was here between 2009 and 2013. It's not often as diplomats that we are rewarded this experience of coming back and following the developments of different countries, and I'm very honored to be the ambassador to Somalia from Denmark. When I was here last time, Somalia had very, very severe conditions coming out of a drought, a severe security crisis, with a huge outflow of refugees and also internally displaced people. Coming back to Mogadishu, and I've been there already twice, has been for me really a fantastic experience, looking at the economic activity in Mogadishu now. Seen there are commercial flights from many different parts of the world coming in and out of Somalia, which was not given at the time when I was here last. Cars in the street, tuk-tuks, people trading, and Somali people having a very much better life than they did 10 years ago. So a lot of progress has been made. Even our bilateral DFI has started to invest in a Somalia fund to support small and medium-sized enterprises in Somalia. This was not given 10 years ago. So a lot of progress has been made in Somalia, and it was indeed a pleasure for me to observe that personally. I also observe that on the political side and on the election cycles, many things has remained the same. The issues that are being discussed are similar to when I was here last time. I fully share both Ambassador Nicholas and Ambassador Tilander's concerns and observations in this. Somalia is really going through a decisive period right now. The elections that we are looking at will be very, very important for how Somalia will develop in the future. I have also observed that the dialogue between the federal government and the federal member states are not as regular and not as smooth as before. For consensus to be made and for agreements to be reached, this dialogue is absolutely crucial to finding the way forward and to honor the agreements that had been made. Of course, we were very happy to see the dialogue and the compromise reached in Dusamareb 1, 2, 3, and that is a basis for moving forward and for successful February 8th elections. But what I have also observed and talking to different leaders is that the level of trust is maybe not as high as one could hope for the time being, going into this very, very second or very, very important period. For us, it's absolutely crucial that there is a will to move forward on all sides, to find the compromises, to negotiate in good faith, and to establish trust amongst all parties. On the short term, of course, as everybody, we look forward to the elections and get them done in a timely manner, in a free and fair and peaceful manner. Freedom of expression is, of course, a key, a solution to the electoral bodies important, the commitment to the 30% women's quota, the selection of the one-on-one, the Somaliland delegation, etc., are all key milestones on the short term. Looking at the long term, past February 8th, there needs to be, this dialogue needs to continue on constitutional reforms, the fundamentals of the country, revenue, resource sharing, the election model of Somalia, what degree of federalism the Somalians want, status of Mogadishu, etc., etc. And of course also highlight the importance of Somalia honoring the international obligations on UN, on women's rights, human rights, etc., as established in relevant UN resolutions. These are the fundamentals that are still there, and that everybody in Somalia is of course facing right now. For us, the fundamental issue is to get a dialogue going, and I listened very carefully to you, Prime Minister's invitation and will to move out and to have that dialogue with all federal member states who needs to be on board in how the way forward is managed. This requires leadership from all sides. We as international community are, as always, fully behind. We will try to support in any way you see possible, but the leadership will have to come from the Somalia leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ulle, Ambassador Ulle. So now I welcome to the floor Mr. Ambassador from Francesco Madeira, African Union.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Excellency, let me really thank you for your announcement. First of all, for the extraordinary remarks that you made throughout this session at the opening, but very particularly for the remarks you made that you are going to visit some of the states again, and after that you are going to have the meeting with all the government is going to meet all the regional heads of state again. This thing, Excellency, is what I would call the inclusive politics in action. It's not just words. It's difficult these days, but you are forging on. Let me thank you for that and recognize this effort that you are making to bring everybody together and listen to whatever difficulties and problems there are. Second, to recognize what Minister Jama said. When the institutions are weak or they are not there yet and are functioning with some difficulties, dialogue, engagement is key for peace and stability. Excellency. Excellency, we since the beginning of this year, the African Union and in AMISOM conducted for the peaceful and credible national elections has been one of top priorities within AMISOM and AU. This remains so in the context of the current mandate that of Peace and Security Council given to AMISOM and under the Communique 848/2019 to provide an election security, but also the task of providing technical support to Somalia's forthcoming elections. With regards to election security, throughout this year, there has been a strong partnership between AMISOM, uniformed personnel, and the Somali police force. Their continuous collaboration has allowed AMISOM to enhance its mandated tasks. These include, amongst many, AMISOM's establishment of an election cell across federal member states to collocate with and advise and mentor on the Somali police. Training Somali police on the use of mapping tools for election security, threat assessment during the height of COVID-19, and training on human rights. Excellency, other electoral-related activities have been the provision of election training security materials on budget and training schedules. More recently, working with the United Nations, AMISOM's police revised the election security concept of operations. This is part of ensuring security plans are compatible with the new electoral model of electoral constituency caucuses. Excellency, we are glad to note that the election security CONOPS will soon be strengthened by the National electoral security policy. Excellency, we are with pleasure that in line with the African Union Peace and Security Council communique, AMISOM civilians also continue to complement uniformed personnel election-related tasks. AMISOM civilians component has focused on, among others, working with the Somali police to draft and contribute to the planning of an election security communication strategy for public information security, holding a series of thematic election workshops, including exploring proposals and initiatives to promote Somali women's participation in the upcoming elections, and holding a series of reconciliation and conflict resolution management workshops for federal member states to support inclusive participation of the upcoming elections. Excellency, holding of these elections is an important factor in ensuring security in Somalia. Everything will have to be done.
On today's event, and to thank at the outset two sets of people. The first is the team in your office, Prime Minister, and from the United Nations who've helped to prepare today's event at very short notice. They've done a tremendous job. And the second is the presidents of the federal member states, because I'm truly grateful for their participation in today's meeting. Jim Swan has provided some remarks on many points of detail on behalf of the international community, and I subscribe to them fully. So perhaps you'll allow me instead to offer a few personal comments on two issues. One is the elections and the other is the year ahead of us. I grew up in a small village in rural England. 400 years ago, a small boy grew up in a village close to mine. His name was Thomas Hobbes, and he became one of Europe's great writers on government. When he was the age I am today, England descended into lawlessness and chaos, and his description of those days became famous. He called it a state of nature. He said, "In such condition there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain. No commodious building, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no arts, no letters, no society, and the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short." His argument was simple, that for a nation to rise, to become great and prosperous, a sovereign force in the world, there must be what he called a social contract. People must agree to give up a little of their selfish interest, to live by a set of rules, a constitution, for the benefit and the greater freedom of all. Now, I read about that a long time ago, but I never really understood its full force until I came to Somalia. Prime Minister, I believe that everything about Somalia's future turns on how strongly Somalis believe in the idea of a social contract, believe that the rebuilding of this nation matters more than their own personal, clan or regional interests, and whether they're willing to give up a little of their selfish interest and live by rules for the good of all. Over the last couple of years, I've watched a variety of elections in the federal member states, and time after time, we've seen a pattern that's regrettable and has repeated itself. We've seen those in office try to manipulate the rules in order to achieve victory, and we've seen those in opposition challenge and disrupt the process unless they think they can win. When it comes to the upcoming national elections, there is an agreement, a set of rules adopted with broad consensus. Now, frankly, it's not the model I would have chosen. But the only way forward is to stick to the agreement and to apply it reasonably. Reopening it now would mean delay, which nobody wants, and probably a much less good outcome. Political competition is legitimate, even necessary, but competition that disrespects the rules can easily become harmful. It's not reasonable to threaten violence or reject the model or decide to appoint your own committees because you don't like those set by the relevant bodies. And it's equally not reasonable, I think, to pick people on committees who seem inappropriate to many of those involved in the process. Those who believe in Somalia, those who believe in the social contract, those who believe in national reconstruction, I believe, need urgently to come together to seek a middle ground, to build on the agreement that's there, and to try to clarify its implementation in a way that works for everybody. So I warmly welcome, Prime Minister, your suggestion of a meeting of the presidents of the federal government and the member states soon to take forward that process. My other points about the future, we've achieved an awful lot over the last year. Debt relief, security reform, many things. And I'm very proud of the role my government has played in those things. But we've also been held back because of the lack of common purpose in the country, and in particular between the federal government and some member states. Whoever wins these national elections, whether it's President Farmajo or someone else, the first task after the elections must be to rebuild national unity. There will then be a great opportunity to finalize the constitution, resolve the questions of the fiscal and security model, take steps to really start to build that roadmap towards democracy, and to take much more imaginative steps to defeat al-Shabaab. That is the task that we must take on in the first months after the election. And after that, we must make sure that donors and foreign partners come together to support the new government with a clearly agreed set of national priorities. I pledge that for our part, the UK will be prepared to do our part to help mobilize your friends, donors and supporters to support the process. And I hope that everyone who cares about Somalia's future will use this opportunity of 2021 to unify the nation and get fully back on track and make as much progress in the next few years as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Benfenda. Now, I would like to call the Switzerland Ambassador, Valentine Selweger. I think she's online.
Mr. Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Ministers of the Federal Government of Somalia, Presidents of the Federal Member States, SRSG, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I have recently arrived in Nairobi and look forward to setting foot in Mogadishu early next year as the new Swiss ambassador to Somalia. I would have loved to be physically present in Mogadishu for today's important meeting, but the COVID-19 pandemic has deeply affected the way we currently work. Let me take this opportunity to express my admiration to the Somali authorities, how they managed to achieve progress during the past month despite a triple crisis of floods, locust invasion, and the COVID pandemic hitting the country. Let me also thank the Prime Minister for his important statement at the beginning of this conference and his clear call for free and fair elections. Prime Minister, Excellencies, this year Somalia Partnership Forum comes at a time when reaffirming and re-establishing an environment of partnership and trust is of crucial importance. In this context, I'm pleased to see that today all presidents of the federal member states are present. It is this particular aid architecture that my country has been supporting in collaboration with the Somali government that has enabled us to come together with the objective to agree on the partnership principles and the mutual accountability framework that will guide our collaboration in the coming months. Let me commend the excellent work performed by the aid coordination unit in these past couple of weeks in order to make this SPF possible. Not all of the ambitious targets set for this year could be reached, unfortunately so, such as the adoption of a reviewed federal constitution by June 2020, the formalization of an Intergovernmental Relations Act by December 2019, or having an electoral process on the basis of a one person, one vote by the end of 2020. This can still represent a benefit as long as we jointly reflect on the reasons why and learn how to do things differently next time. Deepening democratization from the local level might be a promising angle to be pursued. I would like to commend the leadership at federal government and federal member state level for the dialogue process initiated in Dusamareeb and culminated in the consensus-based political agreement reached on the election by the National Consultative Council on 17 September 2020 in Mogadishu. This was a highlight in the field of inclusive politics this year and was a vivid proof that genuine Somali-led dialogue can indeed lead to pragmatic solutions. However, this dialogue and consensus building needs to be sustained. The political agreement of September 17 needs to be successfully implemented in order to guarantee peaceful elections. We therefore urge the federal government and federal member states to re-establish the federal indirect elections team, the state indirect elections team, and the dispute resolution committee through a transparent, consensus-based, and to agree on the consensual modality on how to derive the electoral seats for Somaliland. The electoral process is already now heavily delayed. Any transitional arrangements should be collectively agreed to by all key stakeholders based on dialogue, in order to avoid a situation that could jeopardize the important achievements of Somalia in the past years. It goes without saying that the state building process as a whole cannot be taken forward, let alone be completed, without investing in dialogue and reconciliation at all levels of government, but also with the different parts of the Somali people, including women, youth, minorities and marginalized groups, civil society, and private sector. Such an inclusive and open dialogue will also be required to ensure a more predictable, rules-based system for intergovernmental fiscal transfers, which will be a key element to reach HIPC completion point. Indeed, the absence of trust of such an inclusive dialogue are at the root why the target on the constitutional review process has not been achieved, and that indeed little progress has been achieved since the last Somalia Partnership Forum in 2019 on settling outstanding political questions, e.g. on resource and power sharing. We don't want to risk that the important investment in the constitutional process of the past years will once again be lost, and we appeal to all Somali stakeholders to agree on and adopt non-contentious changes to the provisional constitution in the coming months. My country's willingness to extend the funding for the constitutional review process is indeed a leap of faith that at least some of the good work of the tri-entities will be preserved. I can assure you that Switzerland will remain a partner of Somalia in supporting inclusive dialogue and reconciliation, and in furthering the definition of the key social contract that the Constitution represents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Valentin. Now I would like to call Norway Ambassador for his remark. Ambassador Elin Regnili from Norway.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, and thanks to all present. And indeed, big thanks to all the people that has prepared for this important meeting, and specifically in your own office, Prime Minister. The SPF is obviously a forum where all the key Somali stakeholders should meet with the key international partners to take stock and lay the course for the work ahead. It demands a full participation and commitment on all sides. So I'm pleased to see the president from the member states participating today. I also have to say we would have liked to see and would have appreciated the federal president to be part of this meeting. As Norway is a committed and long-term partner, we do indeed recognize the impressive progress made over the past decade, as many has already mentioned. In the long term, state formation and governance has moved forward in Somalia, despite the challenging post-conflict environment in which it has taken place. Reaching the HIPC decision point in 2020 marks an important milestone in Somalia's state-building process, while at the same time opening a new chapter in the international development cooperation and the state's prospects of basic service, provision, and public good delivery to its people. At the same time, we must all recognize the many challenges. Institutions are provisional and fragile, which arguably will remain the case until a political settlement and on outstanding transitional issues has been reached and constitutionally agreed. The Constitution is the bedrock of a country on which the development is built. And Norway has therefore been among the countries supporting your constitutional review process, which is yet to yield the needed results. Completing the review of the provisional federal constitution is crucial to consolidate the national and sub-national institutions of the federation, to lay a basis for democratic development, peace, reconciliation, resource sharing, and to ensure respect for the human rights of all Somalis. There is indeed a need for a clear commitment and plan on how to take the constitutional review process forward and resolve outstanding political issues after the current electoral process. And I underline the need to lock in the non-contentious issues, as has been mentioned by several. And as many others, we would have liked to see Somalia progress more on the path towards democracy with one person, one vote in the upcoming election. Despite our disappointment, we remain supportive on the broad consensus reached in September 2020 and would emphasize the importance of a timely and credible election with a legitimate outcome, providing the basis for a peaceful transition of power. This has become one of Somalia's most significant hallmarks in the past decade, and the importance of continued consensus building and dialogue in the current situation cannot be said clearly enough. Absence of legitimate elections will in turn jeopardize the further state-building process from the outset and post-elections. Furthermore, you shouldn't be surprised, but we wish to reiterate the importance of implementing the 30% quota for women in the federal parliament. There are so many reasons why, and other colleagues has mentioned some. One of them being that enhancing women participation in decision-making processes remains, of course, crucial if Somalia is to advance towards the strengthening its overall performance. As stated initially, Norway remains a strong supporter of Somalia, as shown by our financial and political support over the years. And the World Bank Bridge loan was one clear sign of our willingness to run risk on behalf of the Somali people. And what could be seen as a detail in all this, but is so important for transparency and accountability, we are now looking forward to the President signing the audit bill in December. It's an important part of the total puzzle. That said, let me conclude by emphasizing that international support has to be aligned with the clear Somali vision. Safeguarding the achieved results and the future prospects of Somalia is a responsibility that foremost lies in the hands of the Somali themselves. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I would like to call the Turkish ambassador, Mohammed Yilmaz.
Thank you, Excellency. Your Excellency, Prime Minister, Excellencies, Ministers, fellow ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to express our sincere thanks to the Federal Government of Somalia for hosting the Somalia Partnership Forum and the international community for the coordinated efforts. We welcome the progress made by the federal government in key sectors, including security, economy, and inclusive politics since the last Partnership Forum. We believe that Somalia has the potential to keep this momentum in the coming period, together with the valuable contributions of the international partners. Political stability and constructive dialogue among political stakeholders are of utmost importance. We appreciate the efforts of the leadership of the federal government of Somalia to sustain dialogue with federal member states. The consensus-building process that commenced in Dusmareb paved the way for an agreement on the model for the 2020 and 2021 federal elections. We believe that the spirit of cooperation should shape the entire electoral process ahead of Somalia. It will be crucial to conduct the elections in transparent, credible, and inclusive manner for the strengthening political stability. Sustainable security can only be achieved within a conducive political environment. Therefore, political reform will remain a priority in the post-2021 period. Completion of the constitutional review process is crucial. Resolving contentious issues such as allocation of powers, resource sharing, fiscal federalism, and the adoption of constitution will be a milestone for the further reconciliation and stability in the country. We welcome the approval of the members of the Judicial Services Commission and the members of the Independent and the Corruption Commission by the Parliament. Codification, implementation, and monitoring are key to constructing a solid constitutional system. Rightful implementation of the electoral law and the adoption of the amendments to the political parties law will constitute important pillars of the evolving political system in Somalia. Along with the strengthening the legal framework, the capacity and administrative challenges need to be addressed properly to set up fair and functional environment for one man, one vote model for 2024 and 25 elections. Thank you.
Now, I would like to welcome the ambassador from China.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Premier Minister, Your Excellency, Deputy Minister, and Cabinet members. It is very timely to hold the Somali Partner Forum in Somalia to review and summarize national priorities, such as peaceful reconstruction, election, and constitution review, and implementation of transitional plan and so on. China appreciates covering of this partnership forum by federal government of Somalia and will actively participate in it. Remarkable progress has been made in the peaceful construction of Somalia. In September this year, the federal government of Somalia and leaders of federal state reached consensus on the election model. We encourage all parties to implement relevant decisions seriously. This year marks the election year of Somalia. Chinese side hope that election in Somalia will be held successfully. We call on all the parties to maintain momentum of dialogue, continue to strengthen political dialogue, communication and consultation, deepen consensus, enhance political mutual trust, and actively promote constitution review and other priorities. International community should provide technical and logistic support for election of Somalia. China appreciates the role of AMISOM in stabilizing a situation in Somalia. The international community should help Somalia continue to strengthen its security capacity building. Somalia has a related 9th National Development Plan and a 5-year plan. International community should, in coordination with Somali National Plan and the 5-year plan, help Somalia develop its economy, improve people's livelihood, and eliminate root causes of violent conflict and humanitarian crisis. China supports efforts of the Somali side to safeguard national sovereignty, dignity, and territorial integrity, and welcomes signing of cooperation framework for sustainable development between the United Nations and the Somali government to comprehensively advance peace, development, and humanitarian China will actively explore practical areas of cooperation with the Somali side to help Somalia realize lasting peace, stability, and development. China will continue to work together with the international community to push forward Somali peace, reconstruction, development, and prosperity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now I will give the last remarks, the Ethiopian Ambassador Jamaluddin from the...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Ministers, FMS ambassadors, representatives, other dignitaries, all protocol observed. Excellency, allow me to congratulate you for pulling this event. My country supports you and your government unconditionally, since we believe our fate is intertwined. We either rise together or we sink together. The key political and current features in your table, Excellency, is elections. Everywhere else, elections are political and heavy, especially when it comes to Africa. Excellency, allow me to say this. Rumors has it that Somalis are known for taking extreme sides when it comes to political contention, short of middle ground. I hope that will be proved wrong. As you embark into this noble journey of seeking the mandate of your constituencies, the likelihood of running into challenges and obvious hurdles will be rife. Whether the allegations, be it the FEED constitution composition or the Somaliland electoral management composition, be it Gedo or now Hiran or Beledweyne, whether these allegations are perceived, political or genuine, all are cracks that beg the attention of the eyes of you, the FMS leadership, and those of the international community. Quick measures to attend to these cases will build and construct the integrity and acceptability of the election process. While it will enhance the legitimacy, make the process participatory, and of course, competitive enough to raise the status quo of the outcome, yet your move to meet with the FMS soon comes before everything else. Excellency, and finally, the civil society role and their contribution need to be enhanced since they are legally in the loop. Their role can be a harmonizing factor which will be able to keep the two sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we don't have enough time, I will give intervention and remark by our Somali Foreign Minister, Mohammed Abdul.
Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, Your Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister, Excellencies, Presidents of the Federal Member States, Excellencies, Ministers, Excellencies, Ambassadors and Representatives, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Mr. Prime Minister, I will be very short, cognizant of the short time we have. First, I wanted to react to the issue that was raised with regard to our bilateral relations with our neighbors. This is not a matter for discussion in this forum, except to say that Somalia respects the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of all its neighbors. We hope to have and build on relations that are based on mutual respect, on increased trade, free movement of goods and people, and on collaboration on security. We will pursue this first through bilateral mechanisms and then through our regional and continental mechanisms available to us. I do not see how this is an emotional or it will bring harm to our reputation. The issue I actually took the floor to react to was on the issue of elections, in which I worked for so long. I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind us all that elections are essentially about two things: representation and participation. Elections are about representation and participation. And the credibility of that representation and participation is given by the Somali people themselves. The federal government and the federal member states have the privilege of negotiating the design of how that representation and participation comes into life. I was very much involved in the process that Halima Ibrahim, chair lady of the NIEC, explained, that was proportional representation. An agreement was signed in June 2018. It was a missed opportunity for Somalia to have an election for the first time in 50 years that would allow the Somali people to have the widest participation. Now, again, the federal government and the federal member states have signed an agreement that is not one person, one vote. The federal government has made a great compromise to accept all the conditions that our federal member states wanted. And this was welcomed by all, including yourselves, Excellencies. It is time to implement that agreement. I want to agree with Ambassador Defender and Ambassador Jim Swan in saying that we do not want to go back on the September 17 agreement. I also want to remind us all that the Prime Minister has offered to open a dialogue. He told us that he is traveling to Puntland and that he will convene a meeting of the heads of the federal member states and the federal government to hammer out the details. I hope this will not be another missed opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I welcome the DBM.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you very much all our international partners and federal government of Somalia ministers. I think we had, before the Prime Minister concludes, we had a very good and positive discussion on inclusive politics. We are committed to delivering a peaceful, credible, free and fair elections that is timely and inclusive. We are also doing our efforts best to safeguarding gains made so far, as well as accelerating consolidation of the constitutional review process. I agree the centrality of elections is important by doing also justice, improving security, and other elements which support free and fair elections. I believe September agreement is flourishing and is moving forward. I disagree, it is diminishing, it's not. The election bodies had trainings, they had discussions, they developed their internal rules of procedure, and they have chosen their leadership. The election dispute resolution committee is also choosing its leadership. I agree we will not revisit September agreement, but we will honor and obey it. We also preserve 30% women's quota. Constitutional court is an important element of our constitutional review process and state building. We have also finalized the process of selecting the Human Rights Commission, which will be tabled before the cabinet very soon. The Prime Minister has announced that he will travel as a part of continuing dialogue. He will travel to the regions and listen to the views of anyone who has any concern or disagreement on the process. And after his visit to the regions, the federal leadership, he announced it is calling for a meeting of the federal member states and federal government of Somalia in Muqdisho. We had the privilege of listening to the views of two leaders of our federal member states. President Axmed Madoobe, and I echo what he said, has clearly stated that the political agreement should be honored He said the implementation of the political agreement is underway and is moving forward. Galmudug urges the agreement to be honored, and anything outside of the agreement should be discussed. And he is ready to host if there is a need for a dialogue to continue. We are preserving, he said, women's quota, and he requested for the help and support of the international community, as it did always, to support and help the process of political agreement to be implemented and elections take place peacefully. I just want to talk about one element which concerns me very much. It's the election of Somaliland representative in the parliament. And probably we had a big gathering yesterday which brought together 1,000 member meeting yesterday in Muqdisho, including MPs. About 50 MPs were there, and you are aware they have issued supporting Prime Minister Robles' appointment of the elections body of Somaliland, and also the 23 traditional leaders of the 135 traditional leaders of Somalia. The 23 from Somaliland yesterday were in the meeting. They have also supported. The Prime Minister has consulted thoroughly everybody, MPs, politicians, civil society, elders, youth, women, and the appointment of the committee for doing elections of Somaliland is thoroughly consulted, and it's inclusive. I just want to touch upon very few points. Yes, Ambassador Nicholas, the Prime Minister has already announced it. He will call for, and the President calls for, as soon as possible, a meeting of the National Security Council. Somalia and its neighbors have peaceful relations, and they are existing and coexisting peacefully. Women's quota, we preserve it. 2024-2025 elections roadmap is already presented by Chairperson Halima of the National Independent Elections Commission, and they will consult with the international community, with federal member states, civil society, women and youth. On freedom of the media, I believe freedom of the media in Somalia is very well respected. The media in Somalia have unlimited freedom. Everybody knows that. The law is reviewed, and if there is any comment or a need for amendment, we stand ready to discuss and table amendments to the Media Act. Finally, I want to touch upon and agree Ambassador Ben Fender's statement. Agree with you with Thomas Hobbes' philosophy, man in a state of war and man in a state of nature. In a state of nature, Somalia has developed an interim constitution, which is the basis for our coexistence, division of labor between federal government of Somalia and federal member states. It gives a space for peaceful transition of power since the constitution is adopted. And we always honor the constitution and our social contract. It is under review, as you know. We never manipulate the rules, but you have seen the leadership the President Farmasha has shown and the Prime Minister compromise and consensus. The political agreement we have is consensus-based, and it is based on compromise. And we need, as you said, to stick to the agreement and obey it. But I don't know if there is always two things: manipulating the rules, we don't manipulate it, but disrupting the process. That is where we want to come together and discuss if there is anything to do about it. I am not an Englishman. Probably Ambassador Ben Fender can help me understand more what consensus is, defining and redefining the term consensus. Consensus to govern, as Minister Salah said, consensus to obey the rule of law, or consensus to have a good night with your wife. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Mahdi, thank you. Again, thank you. As I have said earlier, and I want to say again, I would like to reiterate that my government is committed to fully comply with agreements made in line with the Constitution and with current electoral process. I welcome all constructive feedback and observations. Invitations to federal member states presidents will be issued right after my regional tour. Several issues raised, I will address all of them in my closing remark. waxaan rabaa bulshada Soomaaliyeed inaan u sheego gacmahayga xafiiskayga cid kastoo Soomaali ah oo cabasho ka qabta doorashada iyo habkeeda waa soo dhaweynayaa hal qof kama weyna Soomaali oo dhan Soomaaliya shacabkeeda ayaa hal qof ra'yigiisa iyo rabitaankiisa Soomaaliya ayaa ka weyn safarkayga oo hadda ku wajahan sidaan ku heshiinay president Deni inaan ku gaaro Garowe hadduu ilaahay raali ka noqdo oo aan kala hadlo arrimahaas sidoo kale aan soo maro Gaalkacyo aan ku xijiyo Dhuusamareeb kadibna president Axmed Madoobe waxaan ku heshiinay soo noqoshadiisa markuu ku soo noqdo Jubbaland Kismaayo inaan toos u aado halka isaga ayaan u fadhiyaa walaalahay danaynaya mustaqbalka madaxweynenimada iyagana waxaan leeyahay albaabkayga uu idin furan yahay cabashada aqabtiina diyaar ayaan u ahay in xalliyo laakiin mid xisaabta lagu daro sharciga lagama weyno dastuurka lagama weyno wixii maamul goboleedyada iyo dawladda federaalka ay ku heshiiyeenna waa in la tixgeliyaa habraacaasna la raaca idinkoo mahadsan so thank you so next we will jump to the next session, security transition plan. So we don't have time, so I would like to ask you to introduce your...
Sure. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Security transition, security situation in Somalia continues to improve despite the challenges posed by the terrorist groups Al-Shabaab. Somalia's achievements and ongoing progress in implementing security sector reform, recovering territory from Al-Shabaab and reviewing the Somali transition plan has been steadfast. The federal government of Somalia has undertaken essential and significant steps to reform the security sector by biometrically registering all security personnel and making monthly salary and ration payments directly to their bank accounts without any intermediaries. The elimination of cash payments demonstrates the FGS's commitment to ensuring that security sector salaries are paid on time each month and are traceable to the security sector personnel's bank accounts. The security sector reform is part of the broader public financial reform to which the federal government of Somalia is committed to and which is expected to generate appropriate and suitable security sector reforms that are more likely to improve transparency and accountability than the current situation of security sector setting, which is improving very much well. The objective of the government is reforming the security sector includes registering security sector personnel in HR MIS to enable the FGS to make a data-driven decision. Leadership reform, which rewards excellence and encourages young professionals to participate in the future of the security sector. Establishment of policies and procedures. On transition, the government's vision in the transition is to create a secure environment through a phased multi-year conditions-based and sustainable plan that is supportive of Somali state building objectives that prioritizes the enhancement of a capable, staffed, trained, equipped, and critically enabled Somali institutions and security forces who are better positioned and prepared to take over the security responsibility from AMISOM. Thus far, Somali security forces made a considerable progress in Badbaado 1, holding territories recovered from Al-Shabaab in Lower Shabelle, despite intertwined challenges faced by the Somali security forces. it is without doubt that the Somali National Army is now in a better position and capable of conducting limited operations on its own. Thank you. So let me call for the sake of time, go into the agenda and call for Ambassador Francisco Madeira. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very much. I will try to summarize my statement so that we gain time and we make progress. Excellency, let me reiterate once again my congratulations to your government for hosting this, yet again, the Somalia Partnership Forum in Mogadishu in the middle of the COVID pandemic. This is a major feat, and the quality and the way this thing has been organized is simply remarkable, and thank you for this. Thank you for this. It shows capacity to organize, capacity to execute, and capacity to produce ideas that make sense and that lead to action. Excellency, we are meeting at a crucial time in Somalia's political and security transition. We just spoke about elections, we just spoke about a constitution, and these are the very important pillars in trying to bring security to a country. And yes, elections are about representation, and elections are about participation. And this is important, and if people feel that they have had a say on what is happening, they feel happy, and they feel that they identify themselves with what is obtaining on the ground. Excellency, this participation will yield results such as, in an asymmetric environment in which we find ourselves, whereby Al-Shabaab blends with the common population, participation, having the people on our side is central, is vital, is a matter of life and death. That's the only way we can identify Al-Shabaab and we can extricate them from the middle of the population where it hides. Election and election security will lead us to that. Will create trust and confidence in the government, and the government will be winning partners, will be winning citizens to its side. Actually, the African Union, through AMISOM, has been standing by Somalia. And we have, with the happiness and thankfully, over the years, we have seen the capacity of the Somali security forces progressively increased. Today, in the theater of operations, we witness strike and partnered operations being led by the Somali security forces themselves, as we have recently seen, with impressive military results in Lower Shabelle, of which you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, has just mentioned. These are not things that happen by accident. These things require organization, equipment, coordination, and action. Today, the Somalis are doing these things with effectiveness and results and capacity to withstand Al-Shabaab and chase Al-Shabaab. This, in the African Union's view, is a concrete indicator that Somalia is fast stepping up to assume security, full security responsibilities from AMISOM as we prepare to exit the country. In implementing the 2018 transitional plan, our military, police, and civilian components have enhanced their capacity to work together, jointly and in coordination with the SNA, with the Somali Police Force, the government in general, and the Somali civil society organizations. I'm very happy that we do work with them and we do exchange with them, and we do take their views. Together, we have achieved concrete results in the military front, in the institution and capacity building front, and in the support activities front. An important space was created and expanded where the government at the central and regional levels can extend its outreach, exercise and consolidate its authority and provide services to the people. This space is effectively where government is. Excellency, the current review of the Somali Transition Plan has to continue this effort of expanding the space in which the government continue to reach out to the population and provide the essential services and get the collaboration of the population for the advancement of Somalia. I wish to commend the leadership of the federal government in its Somali-led and Somali-owned exercise. It is an important undertaking with a clear and ambitious vision that must be matched with both pragmatic implementation plan and the required resources. Resources are a major thing, Deputy Prime Minister. Without them, many things cannot happen. And we need to look at this in a very, very careful manner because, Excellency, many things in the current STP have not happened because there were no clear commitments, concrete commitments from those who could provide those resources that for the Operation A, Operation B, Operation C, they will provide the required resources. And this time, Excellency, we need to make sure that this transition plan does not miss that. Excellency, it has to be concrete. It has to lead to results. It can no longer just be political discourse, either from partners or from FMSs or from anybody else. It has to agree, and once agreed, we have to be able to monitor, scrutinize, and be sure that things are happening. And if they are not happening, we know where the weak point is. This was missing in the previous STP. It was missing and everybody was talking and nobody would take responsibility. This STP should not fail on that. Excellency, AMISOM has made its contribution to this review exercise through participation in the 3 technical teams and through the provision of amendments proposals. We are very glad to see that many of our proposals have been taken on board in the current draft. We are therefore glad to know that Somalia is committed to continue a widely consultative process in order to agree the final revised STP. This is important, Excellency, because the STP is both strategic, both concrete, and both executive. And it needs the buy-in of everybody who is in a proper decision-taking level. And this commitment by Somalia will allow that to happen. And I want to assure you, Mr. Prime Minister, and all the participants, that AMISOM will actively participate in the production of the CONOPS that is provided for in this. It will revamp itself and reconfigure itself in a manner that will allow it to live up to the tasks that the current revision will demand of it, to the tasks to all of them, and once that will be assigned to it in the revised Somalia transition plan. Once this plan is endorsed by the federal government of Somalia and by the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. We will execute it because at that moment we will demand what it takes to execute it. And once those things that are required are there, we will do it. Excellency, in fact, while this is being discussed, the STP, of the revised STP. Excellency, I have to say that we had an experience. We know that the issue of mobility is central. And because of that, we have already agreed, as we implement the current STP with the Somali SNA, we have agreed to have regular meetings to discuss how do we materialize these aspects of quick reaction force, how do we effectively coordinate to surround, round up, and hit on Al-Shabaab. We will be having regular meetings on this. Another thing is that we are being asked for transparency and the things we do. We have, at this moment, a joint military planning and coordination with both at the level of the sectors, with the SNA and other Somali security forces. And Excellency, we have another important instrument that we use, the issue of communication for mentorship purposes. That, again, is another very important element. Finally, Excellency, I have to tell you that the issue of coordination with partners, every week today, I talk to you, partners do participate in a coordination meeting that allows them to know what is happening and give them opportunity to contribute what needs to be done. I stop here, Excellency, for the sake of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Fruches. Mr. Ahmed Mohamed Swan, the President of the Jubilee, Somalia. I think he's online. Welcome.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بين استعين على امور الدين والدين صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم اجمعين. رئيس الوزراء جمهورية فدرالية الصومالية madaxda dowladaha xubnaha ka dowladda federaalka xubnaha golaha wasiirada iyo wasaaraha wasaar ku-xigeenka safiirada iyo dhammaan wakiilada beesha caalamka dhammaan kasoo qaybgalayaasha waxaan leeyahay salaamu calaykum. salaan ka bacdi waxaan aad ugu faraxsanahay inaan kasoo qayb galo shirka la qabto marar badan oo lagaga hadlayo arrimaha Soomaaliya oo saaxiibada Soomaalidu lagaga hadlo Soomaaliya iyo xaaladda maraysa iyo wixii markaas laga qaban karo. waxaan rabaa inaan marka hore ka hadlo topiga aan ku qafayo security ku saabsan. aan isleeyahay muhiim buu u yahay Soomaalida iyo beesha caalamkaba. waayo security haddii uu la jiro wax badan oo kale ma jiri karayaan. waxaan rabaa mar labaad inaan mahadceliyo dhammaan dowladaha ka qayb qaatay arrimaha amniga Soomaaliya ama kuwa ciidamada keenay ha noqoto oo wiilashooda iyo gabdhahooda ay naftooda ku waayeen ama ha noqdeen kuwa deeqda bixiya waxaa kaloo rabaa inaan xuso haddii amni wax laga qabanayo waxa ugu muhiimsan waa shacabka Soomaaliyeed oo mahadcelin u baahan sababtoo iyaga afdhabar u ah mar walba markii la amniga wax laga qabto qofka ugu horeeya ku dhacayo waa iyaga waxaan marar badan ka hadalay wax la iska weydiiyey arrimaha amniga iyo sida wax u socdaan waxaa laga hadlayaa bisha December ee sanadka 2021 in laga hadlo sidii ciidanka Soomaalidu ula wareegi lahaa ciidamada Amisom ugu wareegi lahaa waxaa isweydiin lama haynaa wadada iyada waxaa ka horeysay marar badan laga shiray laga soo bilaabo shirkii London wadama kulligood in la tayeeyo oo la dhiso ciidan Soomaaliyeed oo xoog leh awood u leh inuu hanto amniga dalka waxaa ka mid ah ciidamada xoogga dalka Soomaaliyeed ciidanka booliska daraawiishta dowlad goboleedyada ay leeyihiin iyo dhammaan laamaha amniga in la tayeeyo lana dhiso laguna talagalo waddanka gacantiisa waxaa ka horeysa in ciidamada Amisom ay hawl galaan oo ay isku dayaan inay xoreeyaan deegaanada ay shabaabku joogaan si ay u suurta gasho inay gaari karaan in lagu wareejiyo ciidanka Soomaalida wax loo diyaariyay iyaguna marka ay si ambaqaani karaan su-aashu waxay tahay ma la dhisay ciidankii Soomaaliyeed ee loo baahnaa sidii loo baahnaana ma loo dhisay Amisom ma dagaal gashay oo ma ka xoreysay shabaab deegaanadii oo ma u diyaarisay Soomaalida ciidankeeda inay loo wado international community iyo kuwa deeqaha bixiyay ma la xisaabtameen waxay bixinayaan iyo mar walba meesha ay marayaan isla markaan intaa isku daro waxaan oran karaa waxaa taagan xaalad adag oo wax walba marka shirarka la fadhiyana si fiican ay u dhacaan marka shirarka laga tagana warqadaha lagu qoray ma dhaafaan waa kow dowlad Soomaaliyeed oo ciidankii dhisaysa oo la xisaabtamaysa Amisom oo ku talagelaysa inay barnaamijkaas siduu u socdo u qabatay waxaad moodaa shaqadeeda inay saas ka hooseyso waa laba African Union way ku adag tahay inay la xisaabtanto ciidamadeeda ka jooga Soomaaliya ee howlgala oo laga yaabo 5 sano 4 sano 3 sano in ciidan hal dhufeys ku jiro hal maalin xataa waan patrol 2 kilomitir waa saddexaad beesha caalamka oo aan mar walba isweydiinaynin waxa faraha badan bixisaan away fruitski iyo bariga oo dhan waxaan oran karaa Amisom ma ayna gaarin meesha wax laga wareegi lahaa Soomaaliyana uma diyaarsana waxay la wareegi lahayd beesha caalamkuna ma ayna la xisaabtamin waxay bixinaysaa meesha ku baxayeen arrintaas waxaan is leeyahay halkaas ay ciladeedo waxa soo raaca shabaab maanta laba dhinac markaan u kala qaado xagga hoggaanka iyo dhismahooda oo waqtiyadii ugu hooseeyeen xagga moralka dhaqaalaha iyo hoggaaminta shacabka saamaynta ku leeyihiin waa markii ugu sarreysay mana aha dad doqomaa waa dad ka faa'iidaysta jaaniska laakiin waxaad moodaa annagu inaan beerdaraynayno jaaniska aan kula dagaalami lahayn shabaab ee shacabka maanta gacmahooda ku jira dhibaatada ku hayaan looga xoreyn lahaa oo aan annagu ku mashquulsannahay hadal iyo wax badanoo macno sameynay maanta markaan xogta aan ka helayo dhab u sheego ma laha hoggaan adag oo maanta qaban karaya sidii raggii ka horreeyay u waxayn jiray ma laha ciidankoodu keliya waxay isticmaalaan waa qaraxyo iyo wax lamida laakiin nugeylka annaga Soomaalida ah iyo ciidamada Amisom ee nala jooga nugeylka iyaga waxay siisay inay helaan xilli ay iyagu wax walba ka faa'iidaysan karaan waddanka oo dhanna rabaan ay u maamuli karaan taa marka waxaan rabaa inaan si dhaba u idhaahdo arrinta amnigu waxay mar walba ku soo urursataa ay shaqadeedu tahay inaan ka hadallo hadalkana intaa lagu daayo fadhiyadana wax fiican la isugu sheego waxaa hubaal ah dhaqaalaha ugu badan maanta Soomaaliya way ka qaadaan oo way maamulaan oo waxay gaareen inay dadku iyaga u xukuntamaan oo garta iyaga ay u qaadaan taas marka waxay la tahay arrinta amniga ha laga sheego waxa dhabta ee jirta oo warka fiican aynu isu sheegaynaayo anoo aad idin ixtiraamaya ha noqdo mid la fuliyo oo laga daba tago ma muuqato 2021 December wax la kala wareejin karo amson uma diyaarsana dowlad Soomaaliyeed uma diyaarsana marka dowlad Soomaaliyeed oo dhammaan maantana dhibaatada iyo meelaha ay ku hayaan iyo habeen walba waxa loo taagay waan garanay taamalkan ka gudbo waxa amniga qayb ka ah arrimaha siyaasadda oo iyadana aad looga hadlay doorashooyinku dowladaha waaweyn ee caalamka ka jira ee waxay ka noqdaan dhibaatooyinka marka doorashooyinku dhacayaan qaybta ka ah ee mushkiladda keena ee dhibaatada qaybta ka ah ee inta badan ee la isku khilaafo oo dowlado waaweyn oo boqolaal sano election soo sameynayay way ku waxaysan tahay maxaad u malaynaysaa Soomaaliya oo sanadihii la soo dhaafay doorashaduna ay ku tahay barbarasho waxa kaliya deganaanshaha iyo xasiloonida siyaasadda ku haysataana ay tahay in 4 sanaba doorasho dhacdo xukunka la wareejiyo deganaansho ay ku dhacdo waan gaari doonaa marxaladda aan doonayno iyo meesha aan rabno inaan mustaqbalka hiigsano laakiin waxa dhabta ee taalla waxay tahay haddaynan doorashadaas sida loogu talagalay u dhicin oo mar walba tuunka cidda kursiga haysa la tuugaayo damcu uu ku jiri karaa cidda kursiga markaa ku fadhido laakiin waxaa asala broseska doorashada loo marayo inay ka bannaan ka noqdaan waxay ka shaqeeyaan in la noqoto kambeynkoodu siday ku soo noqon lahaayeen iyo doorashada kambeynkay u gelayaan ayna noqonin broseska intii la xidhxidho in laga dhigto harqaan sidii aan ku soo noqon lahaaba wax u talanayaan u cabiranayaan oo waxa dhibaatada ugu badan keeni karaysa una baahan ma aha waddanka iyagu mid xamili karaya waxyaalaha qaar waxaan xusuusnahay 2016 xasan sheekh maxamuud oo madaxweynaha oo damac badan uu kaga jiray maysan dhicin haddana faragelin iyo saameyn ay ku yeesheen dowlad goboleedyada iyo sida loo qabanayo iyo guddiyada Syria fiid iyo in la maamulo midkoodna maysan jirin waxaan rabaa inaan bogaadiyo sida saaxiibada qaarkood ay ka hadlayeen caqabadaha jira waxaa inta badan hadda indhaha lagu soo taagay Axmed Madoobe iyo Jubbaland guddi mayna soo dirin shirkii lagu heshiiyey September goobjoog bay ka ahayd waxbaa lagu heshiiyey waxaan rabaa inaan intii naas oo dhan hortiina ka qiro waxaanu ku heshiinay heshiiskii aanu ku galay 17 September wuxuu ahaa in la qabto doorasho technically aan isla sheegnay sida ay tahay state walba 2 gobol lagu qabto guddi la sameeyo 3 guddi heer state heer federaal iyo guddiga xalinta khilaafaadka waxaan cabasho ka muujinay arrinta gobolka Gedo oo ka tirsan 3 gobol ee Jubbaland ka kooban yahay taasoo macnaheedu uu ahaa in doorashada la qabto deegaan walbana waxa sharcigu uu siinayo uu u qabto doorashada waxaan koow ahay muddadaas 3 bilood ku dhow heshiiska aan galay principally buu ahaa mabdi'iyan in la xalliyo arrinta gobolka Gedo gobolka Gedo maanta kama jiro maamul Jubbaland waxaa haysta jabhado iyo maleesiyaad ciidan oo loo diray waxaad kala socon kartaa media maalin jawaabaha laga bixiyay dadka ma jiro hal mas'uul oo Jubbaland ka soo jeeda oo mas'uulka oo gobolka jooga calaamadda la isticmaalayo waa tijiin waxaan dowladda in badan kaga hadalay arrinta hal xal dib u heshiisiin bay u baahan tahay waxay u baahan tahay dowladda inay maamulka ku soo wareejiso dadkii maamulayay maamulka jooga waxay u baahan tahay dowladdu in markaa dib u heshiisiin loo sameeyo ciddii khilaaf dhexe markaasaa waxaa la qaban karaa doorasho Jubbaland ay maamulayso dowladda roolkeeda ay ku leedahay sidaana ay ku hirgeli karto waxaan rabaa inaan sheego oo aan idiin caddeeyo guddiyada way noo magacaaban yihiin doorashada inay waqtigeeda ku dhacdaan intaasaa qayliyeyni 3 bilood ku dhowaad baa jooga maxay qabatay dowladda federaalkii iyadaa gobolkii gacanta ku haysa maxaa go'aanay soo jeedisay ma ka gaadhay inay ciidamadii ka bixiso ma ka gaadhay dib u heshiisiin in la qabto ma ka gaadhay jubbaland inay maamulkeeda kusoo wareejiso aan idin weydiiye markay puntland doorashadeeda labada meelood ku qabato ay galmudug qabato ee hirshabeelle qabato ee koonfur galbeed qabato jubbaland doorashada waxay ku qabanaysaa hal meel meelasha kalena ciidan ay dowladdu u dirteen yaa loo dirayaa qabanaya waxaan rabaa mudane ra-iisul wasaare adiga iyo madaxweynahaaga iyo wasiir ku-xigeenkii intaad isku noqotaan ha la qeexo jubbaland waxay meesha wax ku qabanayso gobolka galamo jubbaland baa mise ma aha xaq ma u leeyahay maamulka jubbaland inuu qabto doorashada ka dhacaysa gobolka gedo mise dowladda federaalkii qoraal bay soo saaraysaa ay leedahay gobolka gedo waanu la wareegnay iyagoo sababeynaya sababta ula wareegay waxaan rabaa inaan markhaati gashado beesha caalamka iyo ummadda soomaaliyeed war wixii aan ku khaldannahay naga qabta diyaar baanu nahay deegaanka ama aan maamul ama wax kala hadashay arrinta doorashooyinku waa xasaasi waxay keeni kartaa doorashadoo la musuqmaasuq ama barnaamijka iska horkeen lagu sameeyo dibudhac ku yimaada dowladda maraykanka oo intaad aragteen soo jirtay waad arkaysaa jiitanka ka dhacay maxaad u malaynaysaa soomaaliya oo aad garanaysaan 2017 february 3 madaxweyne mid la doortay iyo 2 ka horreysay gacmaha ay qabteen oo la istaajiyey waxay ahayd sida ismuudka ay doorashadu ay u dhacday hadday taasi dhici weydo caqabadeeda iyo mushkiladeeda ilaa waxaa soo raacay waxaa jira musharaxiin iyo dad cabanaya arrinta somaliland waa la soo qaaday waa sax waa la cabanaya waxaan rabnaa maalin horena waan ka hadlayay guddoomiyaha aqalka sare waa mas-uulka ugu sarreeya dadka ka soo jeeda deegaankaas xaq wuxuu u leeyahay isaga iyo xubnaha kalaba tashiga ay leeyihiin in wax laga siiyo waayo istaydyadii bay matalayaan inuu matali waayo meesha uu u magacaaban yahay waa khalad waxaan qabaa arrintaa in dib la isugu noqdo oo dadka ka soo jeeda deegaankaas tashi la isugu keeno mas-uuliyadda la ixtiraamo waxay isku waafaqsan yihiin ay ka hadlaan oo meesha la geeyo dowladda dhexana ay ka dayso faragelinta dheeraadkeeda lagu haysto waxaa taalla cabasho ay soo jeedinayeen musharaxiinta iyo kuwa kale oo laga hadlayo guddiyada heer federaal dadka ku jira siday yihiin in la qanciyay mudan yihiin sababtoo waddankeennu ma xamili karayo oo ma qaadan karayo madmadow jira in intii wax lagu darsado la yidhaha waan ka gudbaynaa waan soconay ra-iisul wasaare rooble maanta adaa prime minister qorayska shaqada aday kugu dhacaysa ma tihid musharax waxayna quman roolka aad leedahay inaad qaadato waxay ahayd muddada intaa le-eg ee 3 bilood hadday soo baxday inay cabasha jirto in wax la isweydiinayo in la isu yimaado la wada fadhiisto weliba markhaatiyaal beesha caalamka ay ka noqoto intii shirar la qabto in la isweydiinaya maxaa khaldamay xaggey wax ka socon waayeen say wax u socon waayeen taasi waa shay muhiim waad ogtihiin marka doorasho iyo xaaladan oo kale ay jirto waqti waa inagu socon shayga asalkii wuxuu yahay in tashigeenu bato wadahadalkeenu bato la isumaatinku bato su-aalaha la isweydiiyo la isqanciyo aan xallino mujtamaca ina sugayahay cadowga shabaabka ee nagu xeeray environmentiga aan ku jirnaa noocuu yahay waxa iman karaya kulligeedu waa wax u baahan sida ay tahay in loo dirso waxaan mar labaad iyo mar saddexaad ku celinaya arrinta doorashooyinka soomaaliya dagaalka shabaab soomaaliya dib u noqota civil war iyo ina dagaal qabiil u dhaco intaba way sababi karta ha laga taxadarayaan la fudeedsana kulamada ha la badiyo xoogaan ha la isu noqdo beesha caalamkana waxaan ka codsanayaa inay korjoogtadana badiso lana socoto wax walba oo dhacayo ase jubbaland boosisha waxaan rabaa inaan idiin sheego inaan doorashada diyaar u nahay inaan guddiyadii diyaar loo yihiin waxaan tabanaynaa inay tahay in la xaqiijiyo gobolka gedo meesha uu ka tirsan yahay iyo maqaamkiisa waxaan qirayaa dowladdu waxay ahayd inaan markaan heshiiska mabdiyan gaadhnay inay qaado tallaabooyinka la gudboonaa dib u heshiisiin ciidankoo la wareejiyo jubbaland oo maamulkeeda lagu wareejiyo iyo doorashadii oo lasu diyaaro hadday intaasi dhici weyday marka malihin annagu eedda jubbalandna ma laha eeddaas iyadana ma aha cidda bixin doonta beeca ay ku baxdaay ha qaadata dowladda federaalka mas-uuliyadda aan isu nimaadno diyaar baanu nahay aan wada hadalno intaasaan ku gebagabayn lahaa arrinta doorashooyinka siday tahay loo fiiriyo jubbaland sida kale xaaladda shabaabku aad bay u culus tahay waxaad ku garanaysaa shabaab culayskiisa maanta haddii meelihii bannaanaa ee hadda galmudug oo kale iyo culaysyadaas ay ka jiraan maxaad u malanaysaa dhulkii duurka ahaa iyo dhulkii buuraleyda ahaa iyo dhibaatada ka iman karaysa fadhigana wuu fiican yahay wax fiican baa laga hadlayaa laakiin aan hoos u dhaadhacno oo aan xisaabtanno oo waddankaani yuuna dib u noqon aad baad u mahadsantihin salaamu calaykum waraxmatullah
waa mahadsan yahay madaxweyne axmed maxamed islaam madaxweynaha jubbaland waxaan rabaa halkaan inuu soo dhaweeyo I would like to call madaxweynaha south west state of Somalia koonfur galbeed ee Soomaaliya Cabdicasiis Xasan Maxamed oo aan rajaynayo inuu online yahay soo madaxweyne
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رئيس الوزراء بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رئيس الوزراء حكومة فدرالية الصومالية
madaxweyne oo ku maqleen hore u socod
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رئيس الوزراء حكومة فدرالية الصومالية مدحوينيالك دولة goboleedyada Soomaaliya wasiirada safiirada iyo wakiilada caalamiga ah kulligii waxaan ku salaamayaa salaanta islaamka assalaamu calaykum waraxmatullaahi wabarakaatuh waa salaam runtii darafay ii tahay inaan shirkan aan maanta muhiimadda leh aan khudbadayda ka jeediyo oo looga hadlayo arrimaha Soomaaliya iyo waxqabadkii iyo waxa hadda loo baahan yahay sida ay ku qabsoomi lahaayeen aad iyo aad aan ugu faraxsanahay marka ugu horeyso haddaan ku bilaabo ajendaha aan kaga qoranahay shirka oo ah security-ga iyo cadaaladda iyo siyaasadda intaba arrimaha amniga muddadii 2 sano ee aan koonfur galbeed joognay aan joogay aniga shakhsiyan waxyaalo badan ayaa noo qabsoomay wax badan oo muhiim ahaa inay qabsoomaan la rabayna ma suurtagelin oo ma qabsoomin waxaan rajaynaynaa haddii ilaahay yidhaaho inay qabsoomaan saa la socotaan koonfur galbeed waxay ka kooban tahay 3 gobol iyo 18 degmo oo aad u waaweyn 14 degmo oo ka mid ah waxay gacanta ugu jirtaa dowlad goboleedka koonfur galbeed 4 degmo oo ka mid ahna waxaa haysto argagixisada caalamiga ah ee shabaab waxaana muddadaas waqtigaan imaanaynay maalimaaday 5 degmo ahayd waxay gacantooda isku jirtay laakiin 1 degmo oo ka mid oo degmada u dhegla ah dib iyo howlgalladii la wadiyey gacanta ugu soo noqotay dowladda 4 degmo oo shabaab gacantiisa ku jirana 2 degmo oo gobolka Boqol ah degmada Tieglow iyo degmada Rabdowle iyo 2 degmo oo gobolka Shabeellada Hoose ah Sablaale iyo Funtumahi ayagana dhaqdhaqaaqyo iyo shaqooyin fiican ayaa ka socda intaas warbixinta guud markaan soo gudbo waxyaalaha muhiimka noo ahaa waxay ahaayeen furitaanka jidka isku xiro jidadka isku xiro koonfur galbeed gobolladeeda iyo degmooyinkeeda oo ugu muhiimsanaa jidka xamar iyo beedabo isku xiro maseeraarka heshiiskii kan ka horreeyey ilaa iyo kuwii innaga naga horreeyey oo brussels heshiiska lagu soo galay ahaa oo weli aan qabsoomin oo ka rajabin nigeria inuu qabsoomi doono yaa waxyaalaha muhiimka u hanoo qabsoomin ka mid ah hanoo qabsoomin degmooyinkaas 14 degmo oo gacanta ku jiro waxay si nabadgelyo ah ugu nool yihiin shacabka ku nool ayadoo ay iska kaashanayaan ciidamada dowladda iyo ciidamada amisom iyo ciidamada dowlad goboleedka koonfur galbeed degmooyinkaas iyo ereyadeedaba waxaa si nabada loogu wada nool yahay oo shacabkana ugu nool yihiin ayna u helaan adeegyadoodii bulshada ayaga oo wixii ay xaqa u lahaayeen waddan u aaday waxbarasho iyo caafimaad iyo adeegyadii bulshada kale oo dhan ka hela waxaa marka aan u baahannahay markii intaas laga tago in la isu furo gobollada iyo degmooyinka baydhabo iyo xamar afgooye iyo baraawe baydhabo iyo bakool degmooyinka dhan isu socodkooda in la isku furo oo ay shaqeeyaan insha allah oo sidii heshiiska uu ahaa oo ay ka wada qayb qaataan hay'adaha amniga laga kaalmeeyo oo ugu horeeyaan amisom iyo dowladaha caalamiga oo kale oo nala shaqeeya waxaan rabaa marka inaan si gooni ah ugu tago mahadceliyo ciidamada amisom iyo ciidamada dowladda federaalka iyo ciidamada goboleedka koonfur galbeed iyo dowladaha sida khaaska ah nagala shaqeeya security-ga oo ay ka mid yihiin dowladda ingiriiska oo ciidamada qaybta lixdamaad tababarada iyo qalabaynta iyo aad noo garab istaagsan oo aad nogala shaqeeya sidaasoo kale ciidamada dan oo ayagana dowladda maraykanka ayadana ay gacan weyn ay siiso amisom waxaan kaloo sidaasoo kale u mahadcelinaynaa amisom police oo 170 ah oo nu soo gaaray oo loogu talagalay inay arrimaha doorashooyinka amniga magaalada baydhabo ay nagala shaqeeyaan ayagana si dhamaystiran ay noo soo gaaraan waxaan uga mahadcelinaynaa amisom iyo ambassador Mandela oo isagana aad uga shaqeeyey amniga waxaan kaloo noo suurtagalay tababaradii ciidankii ingiriiska ahaa ee shabeellada hoose inaan si tartiiba ugu dambeyn bishaan aan qalabaynteeda aan ku dhammayn doono oo haddan aan bilownay qaybteeda wejigeeda koowaad la qalabeeyey ayna qayb ka qayb qaadan doonaan doorashooyinka baraawo iyo baydhababa ay qayb ka noqon doonaan ayna tegi doonaan goobihii loo tababaray oo shabeellada hoose ah degmooyinkii sida afgooye iyo awdhengle iyo marko iyo janaale iyo berire iyo sabiid iyo caanoole iyo mareere sidaasoo kale waxaan codsanaynaa howlgalladii ka socday shabeellada hoose oo wadajirka ahaa oo ciidamada qalabka sido iyo ciidamada qalabka sido iyo ciidamada amisom iyo dowladihii aan hadda soo sheegay oo gacanta weyn ka bixinayay howlgalkii oo janaara markaba hore u socda si loo gaaro ilaa iyo meesha ugu dambeyso ayadana aan la joojinin oo howlgallada ay socdaan markii arrimaha amniga aan intaas uga baxo arrimaha siyaasadda loo dhan yahay koonfur galbeed tallaabooyin fiican oo arrimaha siyaasadda ah ayaan ka qaadnay oo ugu horeyso dib u heshiisiin xasilooni siyaasadeed dhismihii golaha deegaanka وعن دخل يقول لي كل لواتك سيدا وحنا نوصل في الجري وفي الجري دستورك وخبرنا سرعات من الشم مرتورنا هقبل أفكر السرعات inaan ku soo celino dastuurka ama fadhino 95 markaan ka gudbo arrimaha siyaasadda saa la socotaan waxaa jiro arrimihii doorashooyinka oo process dheer iyo wadahadallo dheer badan soo maray muddo dheerna aan soo wadnay wadahadalkana ka soo bilowday samareeb 1 2 3 ugu dambeyntiina heshiis loo dhan yahay oo dadka dhan ay ku qanacsan yihiin lagu gaaray 17 September Muqdisho heshiiska markii uu dhammaaday dadka dhan ay ku wada qanacsanaayeen madaxda dowlad goboleedyada dhan iyo ay joogeen wasaaraha iyo madaxweynahaba oo go'aankaas doorashada dadban waxa uu ka soo baxay heshiiskii markuu dhammaaday wuxuu u gudbay golaha sharci dejinta labada aqalaa lagu ansixiyey ayadoo raali laga yahay yani heshiis lagu yahay baa la ansixiyey waxaa loo gudbay fulintii waxaan ka qaadanay qayb muhiim leh iyo waajibaadkii nooga aadanaa oo ahaa fulinta heshiiskaas oo ahayd laga gudbay oo mas-uuliyaddeeda naga saarnayd inaan soo gudbinay guddigii sid iyo kii fid iyo kii xalinta khilaafaadka annaga oo raacayna habraaci rasmiga ahaa ee lagu heshiiyey ee ay ku heshiiyeen madaxda dowladda oo aan heshiiska ku wada qornay annaga oo raacayno iyo waxaan soo gudbinay xubnihii guddigii sid iyo fid iyo labadii xubnood oo guddiga xalinta khilaafaadka ahayd waxayna ka qayb galeen waxayna u gudbinay shaqooyinkooda inay qabsadaan sidaasoo kale waxaan diyaar u nahay inaan dhammaystirno oon qabanno doorasho xor iyo xalaal ah oo dadka Soomaaliyeed oo dhan ay ku qanacsan yihiin oo dadka reer koonfur galbeed ay ku qanacsan yihiin oo sidii loogu talagalay oo lagu heshiiyey oo heshiiskii loo dhammaan u dhacay aan u qabanno annaga oo fiirinayno boqolkii soddonkii haweenka in ayadana ay suurta gasho oo aan ku soo saarno boqolkii 30 haweenka sidaasoo kale waxaan codsanaynaa madaxda kale oo Soomaaliyeed ee heshiiskan qaybta ka ahayd inay ayagana ay heshiiskii iyo ballantii iyo wixii lagu heshiiyey sidii loogu heshiiyey ay u fuliyaan oo ay u dhaqangeliyaan si ay u dhacdo doorasho waqtigeeda ay ku dhacdo sidii horeyba loo qabsaday wax badan aan horey u sheegnay muddo badanna laga hadlay runtii heshiiskan waxaa loo soo maray dadaal badan waqti badan tanaasul badan dadka Soomaaliyeed oo dhanna waa ogyahay wuxuu soo maray marxaladaha kala duwanaa uu soo maray iyo meesha la kala joogo qof iyo cod dowladda federaalka madaxweynaha ugu horeeyay baarlamaanka uu ku jiro qorshooda wuxuu ahaa in qof iyo cod doorashada la qabto markii aan aragnay duruufaha jiro iyo waqtiga meeshuu marayay madaxda dowlad goboleedyada yaa waxay go'aansadeen in doorashada hadda la hayo annagaa soo jeedinay kulliga annagana heshiisaan ku ahayn in doorashadii dadbanayd oo lagu daray 3 qodob inaan qaadano heshiiskaas madaxda dowladda oo ugu horeeyay madaxweynaha tanaasul suubiyey waa lagu raacay dadka Soomaaliyeed oo dhan iyo siyaasiyiinta iyo shacabka kulligood waa lagu raacay labadii gobol baarlamaankana waa ansixiyeen waa qoran yahay heshiiska waa saxiixnay wax hadda loo noqonayo maaha qof kastoo Soomaaliya haysto baarlamaanka haysto siyaasiyiinta Soomaaliyeed oo dhan haysto kii la taageeray buu ahaa kii lagu farxay buu ahaa waxaan rabnaa sida uu u qornaa in loo dhaqangeliyo oo loo fuliyo aanan gadaal loo noqonin doorashada aysan dib u dhicin waana caddahay waxa ku qornaa waxyaalo cabasho hadday jiraan waa laga wada hadli karaa cabasho la'aan ma dhici karto kanaa saan ahaa waa la sixi karaa laakiin waxay u baahan tahay in la ilaaliyo heshiiskii in la ilaaliyo nidaamkii dowliga ahaa in la ilaaliyo dowladnimada heshiiskaasoo ahaa fulintiisa iyo qodashadiisa ay mas-uul ka ahayd dowladda federaalka iyo xubnaha dowladda federaalka xubnaha dowlad goboleedyada inay fuliyaan heshiiskeeda ahaa waxyaalaha cabashada oo hadda laga hadlayo oo heshiiska ku jira arrimaha Somaliland markii la yiraahdo oo laga hadlayo annaga waa joognay heshiiska waana qoran yahay waa la hayaa madaxda dhanna waa joogeen hal maalinna meel looga hadlay ma jirin cabdi xaashi baa looga dambaynayaa guddiga Somaliland way caddahay heshiiskay ku qoran tahay waxaa ku qoran ra'iisul wasaaraha soo magacaabaya waxaa fadhiyey shirka oo qayb ka ahaa ra'iisul wasaare ku-xigeenka Mahdi Guuleed oo Somaliland ka soo jeedo waxaa lagala tashanayay waxaa hay'adda fulinta yaa qoraysa oo shaqadaas qabanaysa oo ahaa heshiiska cabdixaashimiin oday oo Soomaaliyeed waaye guddoomiyihii waxaa weeye aqalkii sare siyaasiyiinta Soomaaliyeed uu ka mid yahay laakiin ninkii wax la rabay in asaga haddii loo dhiiba ahayd markii meesha la joogay bay ahayd in heshiiska lagu daro la qoro la yidhaahdo cabdixaashimiin dili nasiib wanaag iguma korin hadda in lasoo xasuusto marka oo caqabad laga dhigo anigu ma arki in horey loo socdaan qabaa waxyaalaha lagu heshiiyey oo dhan wax cad bay ahaayeen waxa hadda laga hadlayo oo dhan runtii markii gadaal loo noqdo kuma jirin waa jirtay arrinta ka jirto gado iyo qabashada Jubbaland waxaa looga heshiiyey waxay ahayd in dib u heshiisiin la sameeyo dadka reer Jubbaland dib u heshiisiin loo suuqiyo dowladdana ay qayb ka qaadato Jubbalandna ay qayb ka qaadato dib u heshiisiintaas ay socoto laakiinse aanan condition laga dhigan oo shuruud loogu xirin doorashada arrimaha doorashadana ay socdaan dib u heshiisiintana ay socdo waxaan codsanaynaa marka inaanan dib loo noqonin horey loo socdo aanan inta fiiri aysan noqonin waxaan diyaar u nahay oon habeenii maalin u taagannahay wax walaale iyo wixii cabasho qabo oo Soomaali ah ama siyaasi ha noqdo ama dowlad goboleedyada saaxiibadaanada ka midka ha noqdo waxaan diyaar u nahay inaan xalkeeda ka qayb qaadano laakiin waxaa kaloo diyaar u nahay oon rabnaa in la fuliyo heshiiskii sidii ugu qornaa loo fuliyo aanan dib gocosho aysan u imaanin markii dib loo noqdo aanan dib wax loo go'anin si ayadoo loo danaynhayo ummadda Soomaaliyeed ayadoo la fiirinhayo maxaa ahayd sida ay wax ku socdaan iyo horumarka jiro ayadoo la ixtiraamayo heshiisyadii la soo galay ayadoo la ixtiraamayo dastuurka iyo nidaamka dowliga ah in la tixgeliyaan codsanaynaa asalaamu calaykum waraxmatullaahi wabarakaatu aad u mahadsantihiin ra'iisul wasaaraha iyo madaxda kale oo na dhageysanaysay aad u mahadsantihiin
ومحسن مدحوينه عبد العزيز حسن محمد لفتقران waxaan rabaa inaan ka cod daarto madaxweynihii Jubbaland Axmed Madoobe laga yaabay inuu ciidamada jabhadeed ula jeeday ciidamada qaranka Soomaaliyeed haduusan ula jeedin inuu saxan rabaa ciidamada Soomaaliyeed waa ciidamo qaranka Soomaaliyeed u taagan waa mahadsantiin waxaan haddan u gudbayaa Xasan Xaaji Minister of Defense welcome Xasan Xaaji soo gaabiya waqtiga uu nagu cariirisan salaadii iyo aadno qado
Excellency the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Firstly, let me remind you that the national defense is an exclusive power of the federal government. The federal government of Somalia can employ its soldiers anywhere in the country. Since the last meeting, Excellencies, since our last SPF meeting in Muqdisho, there has been a progress in many areas as earlier indicated. The support of our partners has been instrumental, keeping in mind the challenges faced with the COVID-19 pandemic. With your help, we have moving forward, yet much remains to be done. Our collective effort, coordination, and your continued support to Somalia as we continue to build, reform, and strengthen our defense sector. We have developed a multi-layer security approach with our key partners, which will create increasing coherence and capability in our federal government security management coordinations in the area of highest significance and critical to national importance. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have developed the institutional capacity building plan for the Ministry of Defense, which will ensure the enhanced civilian oversight over the national security forces. We also reviewed the Ministry of Defense Guide, which will be approved in the next few weeks. The National Defense Act, which establishes the legal framework for effective Somali security institution and security forces and define the role, responsibilities, authorities, and function of each as required by Article 130, Article 126, and 127 of the Constitution. The National Defense Act was approved by the Council of Ministers and currently in the Parliament. The second phase of National Security Forces reform process was concluded, which enabled us to identify the active national armed forces from non-active national armed forces and where necessary transfer them into the recently ratified pension and gratuity law. The second phase will also support the restructuring of units to make them more efficient. Furthermore, policy, documents and procedures on finance, logistics, weapon and ammunition, human resource management and transportation were developed and approved by the Council of Ministers in order to improve the efficiency of national armed forces. We are optimistic that once the implementation process begins, these 5 key documents will provide the necessary guideline for the Somali National Army Forces in the fight against corruption and misuse of resources and will enable more federal government accountability for its forces in the future. They are currently reviewing Somali Transition Plan, which is a strategic document that entails realistic, achievable, sustainable objective of federal government of Somalia, supported by all international partners. The lesson we have learned from the challenges faced during the implementation process of 2018 of Transition Plan, which included the lack of proper coordination and resources in line with the federal government priority. However, the institutional capacity building for the Somali surface is required to conduct the operational activities that has been set in the STB. The Somali National Army Forces must be fully capable, equipped, and critically enabled in order to meet the requirement for a successful transition. To realize this objective, the Somali security forces must have the necessary lethal weapon and effective non-lethal equipment to clear and hold a strategic location. The Somali Security Surface Support Unit will be enhanced as it is crucial for operation. We have witnessed the challenges in Operation Badbada 1, as most of our soldiers lost their life as a result of ID attacks. Excellencies, the integration of the Somali security forces to reflect the national image across the sector will be very important as stipulated in the National Security Architecture and the National Defense Strategy 2017-2027. The Somali security forces with a clear command and control will have a clear positive impact on the implementation of transition plan. The integration effort has been observed to have a fruitful result in the unit deployed in Lower Shibele, Danab, and Gorgor Battalion. Excellencies, fourth generation for the upcoming operation and development of Somali security forces is very critical in the implementation of Transition Plan 2021. But a major challenge arises when we still have a burden of non-active members of our security forces who are still on the payroll awaiting to be laid off once the gratuity and pension bill comes into force. The financial obligation of implementation of the pension and gratuity bill is another question that cannot be ignored. The Ministry of Defense with the Somali National Army are committed to generate forces required to conduct joint operation with agreed timeline and work with all stakeholders to ensure timely implementation of STB. In conclusion, we are creating a force which can bring security and stability in our country,
can protect our territorial integrity, and an army which can be peaceful to our nation and to itself, peaceful to our neighbors, and peaceful to the rest of the world. Many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hassan, or the Defense Minister. So I will give now to the floor Minister Abdulqadir Mohammed Noor Jama, Minister of Justice. Please, you have 3 minutes, sir. Then we go to the lunch and pray.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله ثم الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد. Excellencies, distinguished guests, all protocol observed, good morning. I hope it is good afternoon. The Ministry of Justice of the Federal Government of Somalia presents its highest appreciation to our development partners in Somalia. The Ministry applauds the donor programs that aim to support Somalia improve peace, security, and rule of law across the country by building an effective federal justice system for long-term sustainable peace, security, and equal access to justice for all in line with Sustainable Development Goals and DB9. The Ministry of Justice of Federal Government of Somalia completed the following activities since our last SPF meeting. Reached an agreement on justice and correction model of the pending approval of the National Security Council following amendments made by the Council of Ministers, endorsement of Independent Anti-Corruption Committee establishment bill and establishment of Anti-Corruption Commission members, establishment of Judicial Services Commission members, extend access to justice to newly recovered areas. Furthermore, the Ministry intends to complete the following in 2021: finalization of justice and corrections model and inclusion into the Constitution review process, completion of the Custodial Corps HRM registration, establishment of Judicial Training Institute, and final establishment of the Federal Constitutional Courts. Support the implementation of the STP by providing formal justice services to newly recovered areas in collaboration with MOJ at federal member states. Policy drafting remains to be key priority for the FGS. The Ministry will focus on finalization of the penal code, the Somali Civil Code, among many others. The Ministry will also support all in reviewing and amending prioritized legislations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the Ministry is working tirelessly to address issues of good governance for the country, and it has so far presented the Anti-Corruption Commission to Parliament, which was approved. Together with an effective anti-corruption strategy with 5 important thematic areas of focus and the ratification of the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption and giving a go-ahead for the ratification process on United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Somalia has shown institutional and legislative readiness to tackle corruption matters. We invite our development partners, friends of Somalia, and our UN colleagues to support the implementation of this crucial strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's take time for lunch. We have 45 minutes, please. Let's make sure to come back on time. Thank you.